All right, y'all, we are going to go ahead and introduce our speaker for the evening. We've got Greg Kihlstrom, who will be speaking with you in regards to Agile branding. Let's have it for him.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming tonight. Thanks so much to AF Charlotte. Thanks for setting everything up, and this is a very, very cool space. I have to say this is the first time I've spoken in this setting, so kind of cool. I'm going to try not to trip over cables here, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to get started here. My name's Greg Kihlstrom. I am currently SVP Digital, so I lead the digital team at an agency called Yes End. We're based in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside DC. So before that, I owned a digital agency called Carousel 30, which got acquired by Yes End last year. So all said and done, I've been in the agency world for about 15 years now. Other things that I do outside of that, I'm a writer for Forbes. I actually sit on a board at Virginia Tech, Marketing Industry Mentoring Board, so work with a lot of students. I was actually just there yesterday. I spoke with 3 classes in a row, which is a marathon of its own. Very, very fun, but a lot of speaking, a lot of questions from students and stuff like that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, I've been involved with AAF for probably about a decade or so, and I just want to say I'm currently on a bit of a book tour promoting my book, and American Advertising Federation has been so helpful to me. Not only chapters like Charlotte, but I'm actually speaking tomorrow in Norfolk. I've been going around, and really, the American Advertising Federation has been so helpful in, I contact a local chapter, they, hook me up with a speaking gig, and I think it's just been such a great experience. I was involved at the local level in the DC area for a few years, and more recently this summer I started the National Innovation Committee. So it's a national committee with AAF. The purpose of it is to kind of tie between more traditional agencies and companies like Google, Facebook, Quantcast, more MarTech firms. And AAF has not always traditionally been, let's say, on the cutting edge of digital marketing and advertising, and our goal is really to move the organization forward. So really, really happy to be able to do that. So I wrote a book. It's called The Agile Brand. And in this day and age of blogs and Twitter and so on and so forth, the first question that comes to some people's minds is, why write a book? Why not just write a series of blog posts or articles or something like that? And I think there's, as marketers, I think we understand that there are certain messages that require certain mediums, and certain things are appropriate. And I had a bunch of thoughts about branding. I'm not a branding guy, specifically. I'm more, I have a kind of a mix of creative marketing and technology background, but have seen trends in branding and really how brands communicate with consumers, and just how those have shifted in my, about 20 years in the industry, and wanted to kind of put it down, kind of mark a place in time of where we are. And, it's because branding has changed. Consumers certainly are changing and continue to change, and companies really need to keep up. So let's talk about brands. So great quote that really I think is meaningful. So Jeff Bezos of Amazon, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So companies spend millions and millions of dollars on logos and style guides and all of the taglines, marketing campaigns, all of which are obviously very, very important. But if they're not reaching the right people with the right message, and that is a memorable message, really your brand ends up being what people remember about you, what people say about you. So, so important that it is more than just us as marketers broadcasting a one-way message to other people. A brand is more than a logo. It's a vocabulary. It is how people talk about you. It's also a relationship. So it is every touch point that you have with your customers, which means that it's not just us marketers that are responsible for the marketing and the visibility and the relationship that we have with customers. It's really every single touch point an organization has. It's also a continually evolving entity. So what what might be so one day, is going to change. I mean, the way that everything from new devices popping up to new channels, all of those types of things continually change. Brands and marketers have to keep up. And successful brands understand that you have to have this combination of substance, which is solving real problems that people have, not just broadcasting at them. Being focused, so not trying to be everything to everyone, and being relevant to people, so showing people messages that mean something to them at the time, place, and where they are. So brands, and I go through this a little bit more in my book, but brands, I've kind of separated them into a few different stages of evolution. First, though, from Seth Godin. So a brand is not a logo. It's not what it looks like when I look at your product. It's a shortcut for all the expectations I have for what you're about to do for me. So it's so much more than just this flat thing that you can look at. So I've separated the evolution of brands into really four stages, and I'll go through these a little more in detail, but really starting from this very superficial logo idea, something that literally brands something, to a much more complex relationship. So to start out, I mean, at the end of the day, our goal as marketers is to get people to act. So, back in the day, when there was less competition, when there was less specialization, it was enough to have people aware of you in order to get them to act. So a brand could literally be a logo. And so, for what it's worth, the very first logo ever designed, Stella Artois in 1366. So trivia fact there. So back in the day, for several decades and even centuries that followed, it was enough to know that when I see that logo, I know exactly what I'm going to get. I may not like it or I may love it, but I know that when I see that logo on a product, it will be the same wherever I go, whatever country I'm in, whatever city I'm in. It was enough to do that because there were less logos. But all of a sudden, when there is a sea of logos everywhere you look, you can't necessarily tell what a product is going to look like from looking at the logo. So we need to occupy an idea. So this idea of not just being recognizable, but actually having people understand the problem that you're going to solve for them. So bringing perception into play. So the middle photo there, is that a box of tissues or is that a box of Kleenex? When you look for something online, do you search or do you Google? This whole idea of occupying space in someone's head of not only am I recognizable, not only can I recognize the Google logo, but I know that they are going to solve a specific problem that I have. When I have a question, when I'm looking for more information about a product, what do? I Google. But as time goes on, there are a lot of companies that kind of own those ideas and stuff like that. So brands needed to take it to another step, and so brand is experience. So this whole idea of engagement. So being more about I know what problem is going to be solved when I engage with a brand. It's not only do I know what I'm going to get, but I'm actually going to have a good time doing it. It's going to be an easy process. It's going to be as seamless as possible. I mean, not every experience can be great. Getting your driver's license is never going to be fun, but it can be more seamless. It can be a streamlined thing. So this whole idea of making a great experience that is memorable. And so there's a lot of companies that focus on that. I mean, Disney certainly did that decades ago, building theme parks, bringing movies into real life, and continue that into interactive, and have kind of doubled down on it, buying properties like Marvel and Star Wars and things like that to really own this idea of universe building and things like that. But often, experiences are one-off, and so, we need this idea of a relationship. So a relationship is not necessarily an emotional relationship. It's not necessarily that I'm waking up in the morning and saying, I wonder how Starbucks is doing today, but it is, I wake up in the morning and I have a problem that I need to be solved. I'm tired and I need to get to work, and coffee helps me get to work. So that is something where I know they have made that incredibly easy for me to do. I have an app, I scan my phone, get coffee, I'm on my way. They've made that relationship so seamless and so easy that I don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about what coffee shop is across the street. I just know that they're going to solve that. They're consistent in the way that they do it. It's a seamless process, and I can do it any day of the week that I want. And the important thing for all of us to remember is that customer experience doesn't end with a sale. So it's not just if I'm in charge of email marketing, making sure that the email says the right thing and shows the right offer. It's what happens when someone has a problem and calls customer service. What happens when someone walks into a store? What happens when accounting calls and an invoice is due? What is every single touch point that you have? What is that experience like? Because everyone that works for a company is really a marketer. Even employees that never see customers on a day-to-day basis, they go home, they're at a restaurant, they talk with their friends. Everyone in a company is really a marketer. So what changed to bring all of these things about? So I've kind of split this into 5 different categories. So first one is, and I'll go through these a little bit more in detail, but social transformation, brand as experience that I kind of already touched on, market disruption and exponential technology, the modern customer experience and device agnostic consumer, and finally, agile marketing and real-time data. So social transformation is not just about social media. It's also really about how we interact with others, how we find out about the products, the services, the things that we use. It happens a lot on social media, and there's several screenshots here of things like Yelp and other things like that, but it's really, who do you turn to for information? Who do you turn to for advice? There are so many people in the world, including myself and I'm sure many of you, that get advice from people that you have never met, you will never meet. They're probably real people, but you're getting restaurant advice from these people online. Or the way that you ask questions. You ask a device like Alexa where to go for dinner or things like that. So really, the way that we interact with one another, the way that we interact with brands continues to evolve. Brand is experience. So I talked about that a little bit, but a great example of this, so Nike, back in 2006, so before iPhones even existed, when there were still iPods, I don't even think they make them anymore, but Nike came up with Nike Plus. So this whole thing that has grown into apps and many other things, but they understood that in order to be relevant, they had to be about more than shoes. They had to be about a lifestyle. And so they still sell plenty of shoes. They will never stop selling shoes that I could ever imagine, but they know that in order to be relevant, in order to be memorable, they had to be about a lifestyle, about an experience. Market disruption. So Uber is another one of those verbs like Kleenex and Google and things like that. It completely disrupted not only the taxi industry, but also the way that people consider buying cars. Market disruption continues to occur. Anyone in any mature industry is ripe for disruption. If it hasn't already happened, it probably will. Exponential technology. So the idea that we are reaching people in infinitely personalized ways requires artificial intelligence. It requires systems that people cannot do that work. It requires machines to help us do that. So when you're on a site and you interact with chat with a website, is it a real person that you interacted with, or is it a machine? Often, a lot of people don't really know, and at the end of the day, does it really matter? If your problem is solved, does it really matter that artificial intelligence has access to your account and sends you information that helps you log back in or whatever the case may be? At the end of the day, it's really just, it's a way to help people solve a problem. The modern customer experience really means that consumers don't really think as much about what device they're going to use to contact a company. So if you contact Amazon and you have your smartphone in front of you, you're going to use your smartphone. You're not going to walk around the corner to your laptop and open it up and contact Amazon. You're going to use whatever device is in front of you. You're going to use whatever platform you feel comfortable with. And us as marketers have to understand that we have to just be on the platforms that our customers use. Larger companies have to pretty much be everywhere. And those that don't think that they need to be everywhere, I've had some clients that stayed off of social media because they said they didn't want people talking bad about them on social media. Well, the news is they're already talking bad about you on social media. You're just not there to participate in the discussion. So it's really, customers are everywhere. And finally, agile marketing and real-time data. So this whole idea of big data allowing us to collect mountains and mountains of data gave us the ability to start, with the help of machines and things like that, start parsing that data, start analyzing that stuff in real time or near real time. So when you do that, what can you do? You can make decisions faster, you can make better decisions, you can more quickly adjust and things like that. And that helps us become agile. So, what all this means at the end of the day is this traditional marketing funnel that we all saw in Marketing 101 really looks a lot more like this. There is not a linear path that people take to purchasing a product. They may be on 10 different devices in a purchase process. They may search for something online, go in a store to check the price, go back home and buy it. There could be any number of things that happen. So this process, and smart companies know that in order to be successful, they need to keep people in this loop. And so once you buy something, that's not the end. Either bring your friends or buy another product, keep people in this loop and keep them happy, keep the experience great. So Agile helps with this. So as a counterpoint to Agile, when you build rockets, I haven't done that personally, but I've read about it. It takes a lot of planning. And if you get it wrong and you're 90% through, it's very expensive. It's very time consuming. You have to plan everything out to a T. So, if you get all the way through, it's on the launch pad and the door's too small, all of a sudden you have to go back, spend billions of dollars, spend years and years of time and undo what's been done. So building rockets, building websites, building all sorts of things has been done using this methodology called waterfall. Basically what it means is one step has to come before another. If you get all the way through the process and you realize that, again, the door is too small or the requirements are wrong or something like that, or you forgot about an audience to market to, you need to start over because basically you haven't planned properly. So while this is great for some things, I can imagine that rockets are still built that way. It's not great for everything. We have access to data in real time now. We don't have to wait as marketers planning an advertising campaign. We don't have to wait till we get to the end to decide that if it's going to work or not. We can actually see things in real time and adjust. So a quote from Scotty from Star Trek, "The more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain." So, how many times do we spend so much time planning a campaign or doing something like that, and then all of a sudden we put it in market and we realize, oh, wow, we didn't think of this, or the audience just simply doesn't react the way that we wish they would. So Agile can help solve this problem. So Agile is kind of the counterpoint to the waterfall methodology. Basically, it means we still have goals. It doesn't mean that we're not tasked with a quarterly or annual goal. Those things are never going to go away. We still have to sell X amount of widgets by the end of the year, by the end of the quarter, by the end of the month. But what it means is we don't necessarily know that what we're doing this first, let's call this a quarter, we don't necessarily know that what we're doing that first quarter is what we're going to be doing by the third quarter. It means that we're going to be methodical about it. We're not just going to take a look at the data and change things because it doesn't seem to be working, but we are going to be methodical and we're going to change things at increments that make sense. We're going to review, we're going to iterate, we're going to get better. If things go way off track, we have a process for that. We have a sprint, is what they're called in the Agile methodology. By the time we get to that next sprint, we can adjust. We can completely change tack if we need to. We're not committed to a plan that was planned 9 months ago to end out the rest of the year. So, Agile makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I was saying earlier, technology has changed, marketing has changed. There are a lot more tactics. Again, the consumers are everywhere. And consumers have changed. They're looking for personalized information. They're looking for relevant information. They're not looking for the same campaign every week, every month, things like that. And so, Agile applied to marketing doesn't look very different than Agile applied to anything else. It kind of started in the manufacturing world, went into the software world, and a lot of marketers are doing this already, but it's something that just makes so much sense given what we have access to now. So what is an Agile brand? So I split this into 6 different things. So Agile brands understand that change is the only constant. We are not in a world where we can just set it and forget it anymore, if we ever were. So the change is the only constant. Agile brands can identify when evolutionary versus revolutionary processes are needed. So we don't always have to start completely over from scratch. In some cases, it's actually better not to. It's actually better to evolve. I think Amazon is a great example of this, where when is the last time Amazon completely redesigned their website? It was probably about 10 plus years ago at this point. Yet, all of the pages on their site are constantly being improved. If you actually look at a screenshot of a page, a product page, from 1 year to the next, 5 years to the next, they are constantly improving. But they are not moving things around so much that their customers are alienated. So, if all of a sudden the purchase button is in the lower left side and it's always been in the upper right, having designed my share of websites, you're going to get some angry customers, and you're going to get confused customers, and they're probably going to go to another website that looks more like Amazon. So things like that, it doesn't always require that start from scratch mentality. Agile brands make adaptivity and collaboration part of their culture. So I think this is speaking to that it's not just marketers that are part of the solution of being more agile, being more customer focused. It's everyone in an organization, and that requires collaboration. Whether you're a small organization where you can walk down the hall and talk to everyone, or if you take up floors in buildings or all over the world, it still takes collaboration, and that needs to be part of the culture. Agile brands stay true to their values no matter what. And I think that's getting more and more important. I mean, there's a lot of talk about millennials wanting to work with companies or wanting to buy from companies that are true to their values. I don't think it's just millennials. I think it's all of us. I think we're in a day and age where it really does matter what we support. And some companies are going to be more vocal or not about that, and that's fine also. But it's important that a company sticks to what they believe in and doesn't completely go against what they stand for. Agile brands know that it's not about channels and tactics, it's about customer experience. So for instance, you can have the absolute best Twitter channel in the world, but if your website is terrible and people are rude to you when you walk in a store, what does it matter? That's one touch point. That's one experience that someone has. It's about a holistic customer experience. Obviously, your Twitter channel needs to be great, but so does everything else. And finally, Agile brands listen to and respond to their customers. They don't talk at them. So there is a place for advertising. There is a place for broadcasting those messages, but you have to listen. You have to be able to respond. You have to be on channels that allow that, and you have to put yourself out there. And sometimes that's tough because there's a lot of customers are more likely to complain than they are to praise you on things like social media. But being there, responding, showing your character, showing your values when you do that speaks a lot to your brand. And so it's a balancing act. There are things that stay the same or need to stay the same, and there are things that need to adapt. Mission and values should not change. I worked I call it my last day job, but I worked for a tech startup many years ago, and their mission seemed to change pretty much every week, and sure enough, they went out of business. They didn't know who they wanted to be. They didn't know what their mission was. Same thing with values. You need to know what your values are, but your audiences may change, whether you're focusing on different audiences over time, or maybe your audiences mature or change. Your positioning may change to follow that. Your strategies to tie your goals to your audiences may change, but really, the mission and values really stay the same. So it's this combination of always iterating, always optimizing, but keeping some things constant. So a couple examples of this. So first, I'll start with the what not to do. So anybody remember Oldsmobile? So I don't know how long they haven't been around, but so this is a lovely 1990 Oldsmobile 98. So fine automobiles, nothing wrong with them. They had a loyal audience, good cars, not necessarily great cars, but good cars. People were happy with them, going right along. All of a sudden, they decided, we kind of have an older skewing audience. We want to appeal to the young kids and so on and so forth. So they came up with this ad campaign. I don't know if you remember this, but early 90s or late 80s, I guess, in a little bit into the early 90s. So they had fathers and their daughters in these commercials, not your father's Oldsmobile. So, you know, it's cool. William Shatner, Ringo Starr were in those commercials, kind of neat. But a few things wrong. So it wasn't authentic to their brand. So two things wrong. First, they alienate their core customers. They're saying, we don't actually want you anymore. We're actually for your kids now. So stop buying Oldsmobiles, basically. And, you know, the kids that they were selling to, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, that car was a little nicer than the 98 on the other page maybe, but it's still an Oldsmobile. It wasn't a completely different car. It wasn't going to win over the next generation. So they ended up not really being effective with the audience they wanted to go after and alienating their core audience. And sure enough, several years later, they kind of meandered a little bit more, and then eventually GM retired them. So an example of what to do, I think a great example of this, and I go into a little more detail about this in the book, is Netflix, of really, you know, how to stay nimble and how to be agile. So those of you that remember, so back in the late 90s, Netflix also had a terrible logo, but Netflix was started basically because someone was sick of paying late fees, and I don't blame them. But you know, it's sometimes hard to remember how big Blockbuster was, and just how unmovable and unshakable everyone thought they were. They kept, you know, they were well funded. They were making money hand over fist. Who ever would have thought that some mail order DVD company would disrupt Blockbuster? I think there might be one Blockbuster still in existence, or somewhere in Alaska, I believe. So the lesson here is Netflix wasn't afraid to disrupt. They weren't afraid to go up against this huge, literal Blockbuster company. So that wasn't enough, though. Because, you know, imagine what would happen if there was still a mail-order DVD company and that's all they did. So Netflix realized early on that streaming video was the future. So before broadband was really, really ready for it, I mean, this was early days, they were embracing this idea of streaming video, and they did it. They doubled down on it. They kept their DVD business. They didn't get rid of it, but they knew that this was the future, and so they invested in that. And so they embraced this idea of evolution. So not starting over from scratch, they still kept their DVD business, but they embraced evolution. And then, I don't know how many of you remember Quickster. So they decided at one point, I believe this was about 7-8 years ago, that they were going to split their business off. So they were going to have Quickster and Netflix. One was going to be mail order, one was going to be streaming. They planned, and those of you that have planned national brand rollouts, they obviously designed a logo, planned a complete rollout of this company. 6 weeks before launch, there was such customer uproar about people not wanting to pay 2 subscription fees if they wanted to subscribe to both of them. They pulled the brand. They were 6 weeks from launch. I mean, sometimes I still think that's crazy, and yet they learned from their mistakes. They started down this path. They actually listened to their customers, and they were agile enough and nimble enough to actually walk back from that. I think it's an amazing story of not just doubling down on a bad mistake, or, you know, calling something a sunk cost, losing customers, or things like that. And then, you know, still that wasn't enough, and you know, so still now Netflix is taking on really pretty much everyone. I mean, you know, from network TV to cable TV, investing billions and billions of dollars in original programming. You know, hopefully they will continue to take risks and stuff like that. But I think the lesson is, again, imagine if Netflix said, you know what, streaming isn't for me. We're just going to keep mailing people DVDs. Where would they be right now? Agile brands are nimble to risk and quick to seize opportunity. They aren't afraid to let go of the consistency handcuffs or bend rules when necessary. So how do you start being agile? There's 4 things that I outlined here. So first, you have to understand your company goals and values. In order to stay true to those things, you have to understand what they are. It seems like that is logical and like everyone should do that. I work at an agency, I work with a lot of clients. They say they have goals and values. I ask them really some tough questions, and it's amazing how they respond. Make sure that you really, really understand, because you're gonna have to stay true to those no matter what. Understand why customers need you. And that's not what product you sell or how much can you get them to pay for it. It's what is the actual problem that you are solving for your customers. If you don't understand that, anyone can undercut you on price, anyone can do any number of tactics, and they're gonna get you. Learn how to measure the customer experience. So not just measuring tactics, not just measuring traffic on your website, not just measuring social media shares and things like that, but measure every step in the process. Understand how the different steps correlate to one another. Understand how one thing adds up to another. This is made much easier with newer and newer technology, but still, even very sophisticated companies are not doing this. They're measuring single channels and trying to get them as good as they can, but not really thinking holistically. Finally, create a process to optimize your customer experience. So first, you have to measure, and you have to be able to measure, but then once you do that, you have to figure out, again, it's not just optimizing one thing, it's optimizing how all of these things work in tandem with one another. So to conclude, there's 4 things that I've outlined that are really the values that Agile brands need to embrace. So first, it's valuing long-term customers over short-term sales. It's, as I was saying earlier, quarterly goals, monthly goals, annual goals, those are never going to go away. But brands really need to understand that sometimes it takes an investment to get someone in the door, to keep them. If you have a great experience, I'm sure we all know that, it's so much harder to win a new client than it is to keep an existing one. Agile brands value dialogue with customers over broadcasting one-way marketing messages. Again, it's being where your customers are, wherever they are, solving their problems. Agile brands stay true to their values over doing whatever they can to generate profits. So profits, certainly important, vital to companies, but long term, thinking that way, it's really about staying true to what made you great, what made people want to buy from you in the first place. And finally, Agile brands value continual improvement over maintaining the status quo. Again, the Netflix example is a great one over that. Just imagine if they weren't constantly thinking about what's next, how to do things better. And I imagine, I outlined 4 things here. I would imagine we are on the cusp of some 5th evolution of brands, and with increasing complexity, with customers that have access to increasing amounts of information, increasing choice, there will become more evolution. And finally, a quote from Steve Jobs. So to me, marketing is about values. This is a very noisy world, and we're not going to get the chance to get people to remember much about us. So we have to be really clear on what we want them to know. It's about standing out from the noise, about really making people understand, again, what are you helping them do? It's not about selling products, it's about helping people. And ultimately, focusing on those things that matter while continually optimizing. So thanks so much. I appreciate you having me here. So like I said, I wrote a book. You can access it, find it on my website there. And I don't know if anyone has questions. I'd be happy to answer. Or we can all just drink beer. Either one is totally fine.
I have a question.
Sure.
So what's your advice to agencies who are not necessarily in control of all the facets of the brand? So we may not be able to define the experience or the product, but we're trying to help maybe move our clients to being more agile and more responsive. Yeah. How do you kind of find that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's exactly where I'm at too. So it's interesting because this does require organizational change, and I think there's a lot of just kind of reading the trends in the agency world. There's a lot of competition from places like Booz Allen and the big consulting firms that are really, for better or worse, they are thinking much further ahead than agencies are, and they have deeper inroads into organizations and at the C-level and things like that. So it's a challenge, and I think it's what I try to do is try to influence my points of contact to then influence others, but it really does take collaboration. It takes everyone kind of being on the same page to do that. And I would say marketing has a benefit of being tasked with measuring success. So that's sometimes an inroad to say, okay, well, you know what, in order to do my job, I need to measure what you're doing. It's not to evaluate your performance or something like that, your job performance, but it is, to help me do a great job. So yeah. Anybody else? Oh, sure.
You talked about measuring customer experience, but not doing it in the ways we all know how to do it through digital. So how would you measure?
Sure. I'm going to stand on that side. Yeah, sure. So, the question was, how do you measure customer experience based, in lieu of measuring, single channels and things like that? How do you measure? So I think we do a lot of. So my agency does some of this stuff, and we do a lot of digital measurement. But I think it's tying all of the channels together. So we use some tools, some customer journey orchestration tools, so fancy words, but basically tying things together, measuring things, and ultimately, our goal is to measure attribution, but there's a lot of, that becomes a very difficult thing when you have that circle diagram of people touching 10 different channels and things like that. So we're using better and better tools to try to figure out, okay, well, how do we actually track this person, building profiles of consumers so we can actually see, okay, well, this is the same person that was on their smartphone, but now they're on their laptop. It's to non-marketers, it sounds kind of creepy, but I think it's fun. But yeah, so it's really it's tying data together. It's not really, it's not tracking those digital touch points. But yeah. All right. Well. Oh yeah.
So the big question: how do you find that Netflix logo?
Wikipedia. Wikipedia is like, they've got everything. Yeah. All right, well, thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate it. Oh.
So for the process of switching from waterfall to Agile, what would be your biggest tip? Because it's stressful.
So switching from waterfall to Agile, and I will say, I still use waterfall for some things. I think, that's the first step really is it appropriate for the task? Second is, I think you can do it in incremental ways. So we actually started by taking kind of a linear process, but breaking it up into sprints and doing it that way. Now really, any marketing project that we do is always Agile. And some of that, so from an agency perspective, it's setting expectations with clients. It's, again, letting them know that, okay, we're going to come up with a quarterly plan, not an annual plan, or we're going to come up with annual goals, but again, that idea that we're going to revisit this, we're going to make sure it makes sense, and ultimately, especially in the marketing world, like our clients are much happier with that. It's more realistic. It's us saying we're not just going to like set it and forget it and hope for the best, and we'll revisit it next year. It's us being more responsive to them. So I think it's been a positive thing for us. Yeah, absolutely. All right. All right, thank you.